Yeah, WOLFE GLICK versus Alberto Lara is going to be an incredible match. Of course, WOLFE is most famous for being the 2016 world champion and the 2012 world's runner-up. Alberto has had an incredible run as well, but you can see here, WOLFE has won 7 regional championships, has multiple international championships to his name, in addition to being the Players' Cup champion. And WOLFE has an extremely long resume of wins to his name, befitting someone who has been around since 2011.
Yeah, pretty impressive list there of accomplishments. I'm hoping to add an 8th regional championship on top of it.
He will be bringing his team of Iron Hands, Landorus, Urshifu, Rapid Strike, Amoonguss, Chi-Yu, and Fluttermane to this top 4 match in hopes of defeating this man, Alberto Lara, who is no slouch in the achievements region either. 23 times Alberto has made it to a top cut at a regional championships.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's already counting today or if that's ticked up to 24 times, but just a stunning number of regional top cuts. A player who was in the North American top 8 last season and made day 2 of the World Championships because of it, and 3-time regional champion as well.
Yeah, but crucially, top achievement in sort of the next level up has been finalist. Finalist in 2018 Latin American International Championship and finalist in the 2023 Oceania International Championship. Still looking for that international championship or the World Championships to add to that resume.
Yeah, missing some of those really top level finishes that WOLFE already has.
But he is going to be trying to add another regional championship to his name here by running a team of Fluttermane, Amoonguss, Landorus, Therian Form, Kingambit, Gastrodon, and Heatran. And I think this is an extremely interesting matchup here. This Kingambit is a Pokemon that has had success the entire season since we've been in the Paldea region, always because Intimidate remains a top threat. Once you get an Intimidate on that Kingambit, the Defiant boost kicks in, and it suddenly becomes an extremely potent offensive threat. And that Dark and Steel typing is actually really good into a lot of Pokemon that have been in the meta.
But not quite as good into a lot of the Pokemon on WOLFE's side of the field. 4 of them have super effective same type boosted moves into that Kingambit, which may force a Terra, but at that point, a couple of them can still hit it with super effective same type boosted moves. So Kingambit might find like a difficult role in this game, which could open it up for WOLFE to still bring that Landorus, not worry too much about the Defiant. That's going to be a kind of critical decision on WOLFE's side of the field. We also have kind of 2 slower paced teams. A lot of the tournaments in the story has been a clash of fast paced teams versus slow paced teams. Here, both players able to slow it down a little bit. WOLFE can of course play very aggressively with a Choice Specs Chi-Yu that can just put out massive damage, but can also slow it down when needed. And Alberto with the Amoonguss and Heatran and Gastrodon is definitely able to slow it down.
Absolutely. Yeah, these are, it's not quite as slow as some of the Trick Room teams or some of the other Cresselia focused teams. We don't see Cresselia on either of these teams, but definitely not trying to go for the explosive pace that we see from some of the Tailwind teams. Instead, it's going to be Alberto leading out with the Fluttermane and the Landorus. So those are actually 2 pretty potent offensive threats on the field for Alberto, and crucially gets that Intimidate down onto the Iron Hands and Amoonguss that WOLFE has brought. So the Iron Hands taking that Intimidate, but having the Amoonguss out here feels pretty good about the Fluttermane, but that Landorus continues, as we've seen over and over again, these Choice Scarf Landorus and those Terra Blast flying Pokemon able to really threaten Amoonguss, which is normally feels pretty good about being in front of these Pokemon.
Yeah, this Landorus looks to be in an okay position, but of course has to worry about Intimidate if WOLFE's Landorus is in the back, does not have the clear amulet like WOLFE has. But Intimidate, like you mentioned, is going to be pretty valuable in Iron Hands. This is a heavy slam Iron Hand, so it is instantly threatening quite a bit of offense against this Fluttermane, but depending on how the 2 of them are trained, 1 Intimidate might be enough to buy some time for this Fluttermane.
Okay, well, WOLFE is going to retreat the Iron Hands to get the Intimidate reset, brings in his own Landorus, so getting the Intimidate off onto Alberto's Landorus. Again, because that is a Choice Scarf Landorus, we'll be locking into an attack here. That's the Stomping Tantrum. Locks into Stomping Tantrum, does not affect the Landorus that came in on WOLFE's side, but instead, it's the Choice Specs Moonblast that's just dealing so much damage onto that Landorus on the switch-in. But WOLFE does come out a little bit ahead here, gets the Spore onto Fluttermane. That Pokemon is now asleep, and now WOLFE's Landorus is maybe feeling pretty safe here.
Yeah, WOLFE's Landorus feeling more safe, but yeah, I think a really nice first turn of offense from Alberto, identifying that with Amoonguss sitting there in the other spot, the Assault Vest Iron Hands are unable to protect that was a pretty vulnerable spot. Looking around Wolf's team sheet, nothing wanted to take that combination of Stomping Tantrum plus Moonblast. Landorus is probably the thing that could take it best and still lost nearly 80% of its health. So, you know, gives up a sleep to do it, but gets a pretty valuable safe turn of offense. That was something that was going to deliver damage for Alberto. And when you're looking at these two more balanced teams, just finding chances to put down damage that you know will land and start to put holes in the team. The next time that Wolf needs Landorus for an Intimidate, it's going to be a lot more vulnerable because it's already so low.
Absolutely. Alberto switching out the Fluttermane does have the King Gambit in the back, so going to make those Intimidates even riskier for Wolf going forward. Even just knowing that King Gambit is an option for Alberto can make you think twice about switching in the Landorus willy-nilly. Going to go ahead and get the Terrassalization here, so Terra flying on the Landorus on Wolf's side. Going to be able to fire back a big Terra Blast, but it's going to be the Stomping Tantrum. Took the Intimidate, but of course, because it attacked the flying-type Landorus, doubled the power. But that Intimidate allows Amoonguss to shrug that one off, eat the Citrus Berry. Landorus gets to fire off a Terra Blast, and this Amoonguss is also going to be able to have potentially a very high-impact play here. Flying-type Terra Blast into the King Gambit deals a little bit of damage, and then the Spore falling on the Landorus. So Alberto has some big, heavy hitters out here, but also has two Pokemon asleep, neither of which have taken their first turn of sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Half of Alberto's team is asleep and needs a sleep turn. The decision to lock into the Stomping Tantrum on the first turn, that means that Amoonguss has not been as threatened. It only took 50% there. That's a lot less than a couple of Flying-type Terra Blasts might have.
And that was a double power one.
Right. And it does mean the Terra is still available for Alberto, but so far Alberto's team is looking so sleepy.
Yeah, it's been a long weekend for sure, and I can understand Alberto having come from the West Coast, maybe feeling the effects of that jet lag here, sleeping it off. But Landorus is going to stay in and get the first turn of sleep off here, while Kowtow Cleave connects with Amoonguss without any Defiant boost, not able to do a whole lot of damage here, and that's another Spore. Wolf is spreading this sleep status. King Gambit now asleep. Landorus, of course, now does have the ability to wake up.
It does have the ability to wake up. Of course, it could be a Landorus coming in the Amoonguss slot to intimidate again that Landorus. That comes with a risk that you're giving the Defiant boost to King Gambit. But unless Alberto's ready to right now spin Terra on a 0 sleep turn, King Gambit, it's just going to have to switch out to avoid taking a Drain Punch from this Iron Hands.
Well, the other safe switch for a Drain Punch instead of a Terra-ing is going to be switching out for the Fluttermane. So Wolf is actually going to switch out the Amoonguss, activate that Regenerator, get a little bit more HP back on that Pokemon. And here is another Intimidate coming through from that flying Landorus. Connects onto Alberto's Choice Scarf Landorus that now has taken 2 Intimidates and now a second turn of sleep.
A second turn of sleep. Like you mentioned, Fluttermane, totally safe switch into this Drain Punch here, but because it has not slept for a turn yet, it really has no presence on the field. It's threatened by both the Landorus and the Iron Hands. Either one can safely win a KO it. There's no Intimidate option for Alberto, so it's just a sitting duck out there. It has to spin to turn sleeping and then go down if that's what Wolf wants to do. And of course, Alberto's Landorus still locked into Stomping Tantrum, still can't threaten the Landorus on the other side, and now at -2 attack, can't threaten the Iron Hands much either.
Yeah, just gonna have to switch back in the King Gambit, which is going to be able to tank up a future Terra Blast from the Landorus. But here comes the Heatran from Alberto's side, revealing the 4th and final Pokemon on his team. Happy to tank a Heavy Slam coming in for the Fluttermane. Here's just a little bit more damage on that King Gambit with the Terra Blast. And those are resisted hits, but they are starting to add up with no way to recover health on Alberto's side. Of course, Heatran happy to shrug off that Heavy Slam as it comes through.
Yeah, happy to shrug it off, but unlike Alberto's Landorus, Wolf's is not locked into that move. It can just switch gears and go into a Stomping Tantrum on this Heatran. Of course, Alberto, being very precious with the Terra, still has it available, can at any moment make a more decisive play by tearing one of these Pokemon defensively and look for some offense. But otherwise, he's just having to kind of switch around and pivot where there's a little less payoff possible on the next turn afterwards, because all those Pokemon are just asleep. Fluttermane switches in. Well, it's still asleep. It can't actually do anything on the field, so it has to switch back out. King Gambit switches in, but it's still asleep. And still threatened here on the field. It's such a difficult situation for Alberto that Amoonguss got so many chances early in the game because of the decision to lock into Stomping Tantrum and not prioritize going after it, not having the Heatran on the field earlier to prioritize going after it, and it's making this game very difficult for Alberto.
That Amoonguss has put 3 Pokemon to sleep, and all 3 of them are still asleep, and only one of them has even taken the first sleep turn yet. So both the Fluttermane and the King Gambit are still very much asleep. And we see the clear amulet from Wolfe's Landorus, so even Alberto's Intimidate as it comes through, not actually doing anything to Wolfe's Landorus. But we'll just go ahead and U-turn. Has realized that Alberto is just switching around all of his Pokemon, wants to be able to get in some more options here to maybe bust through this switch core, this pivot core that Alberto has been running.
Well, if you want to bust through some defensive Pokemon, Chi-Yu is about as good as you can get to do it. Of course, Chi-Yu threatened by both of these Pokemon, and the Terra has already been spent, so not going to be helpful there. But maybe you have enough Intimidates down, enough opportunities for Intimidates that you can allow Chi-Yu to take a hit. Also maybe train more bulkily than the Chi-Yu we saw go down to just a Terra Blast in an earlier round. Might be able to withstand a hit from this Landorus. But definitely looking for an opportunity for this Chi-Yu, but it's a little bit of a vulnerable opportunity.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as safe as Wolfe has been playing the game up till now. So this could be a really decisive turn. One way or another, something important is really going to finally happen other than just Spores going down.
Yeah, and this Landorus, again, 3 Pokemon have been put to sleep. 1 has taken a turn of sleep, and that is the Landorus. So Landorus is able to actually act if it wakes up for this turn.
If it wakes up. The other thing to mention is that the Heatran already being on the field means Chi-Yu is definitely going to find an overheat target if that's what it clicks. In previous situations, if Wolfe had brought the Chi-Yu on the field, he would have had to worry about a Heatran coming in. No worry this turn.
Yeah,
just
Heatran's actually leaving. And instead going to be Fluttermane alongside the King Gambit. So King Gambit switching in for the Landorus, and it really is a revolving door of Pokemon here as Iron Hand switches back out for the Landorus. So King Gambit finally gets in on an Intimidate, but it's also getting in on an Intimidate in front of Chi-Yu that is able to act now.
Yeah, in front of Chi-Yu that still hasn't actually used its move for the turn, and that looks like an overheat headed towards King Gambit.
Yeah, not too defiant in the face of an overheat from Specs Chi-Yu.
Yeah, I don't think the Assault Vest is going to matter too much in that situation. That is way more than enough damage. And so the first KO has been taken by Wolfe, has used all of that pressure put down by the sleeping Pokemon, and finally has 2 attackers on the field against 2 sleeping Pokemon ready to continue to double down on it. Of course, constantly the risk now, this Landorus can wake up. Not the same risk from the Fluttermane, but if you play too passively, you lose that advantage. The Fluttermane will get the chance to wake up.
Yeah, and Wolfe is going to protect that Chi-Yu. It did its job. It punched a hole in Alberto's team, and Wolfe is now going to need to capitalize it, saving both the Chi-Yu and the Landorus. With that King Gambit off the board, this Landorus becomes a lot safer to bring in against Alberto's Landorus. Of course, not going to be too worried about the Fluttermane or the Heatran. Landorus takes another turn of sleep here, and Fluttermane takes its first turn of sleep. So we are now in a situation where both of these Pokemon could wake up, and Wolfe has decided to pivot into the Iron Hands here, cover with Fake Out, and also have that Amoonguss back out too. If one of those Pokemon deigns to wake up, put it right back to sleep.
Yeah, they've had their time to sleep. It's time to go back to sleep again. Of course, the Fluttermane now has spent a turn of sleep, could wake at any moment and threaten huge Moonblasts into Iron Hands. Should be bulky enough to take 1, but that's the kind of hole that Alberto is looking for to start putting pressure on Wolfe's team. If it takes a Moonblast, it won't be able to take a Stomping Tantrum in the future. Wolfe can use a Fake Out to kind of prevent the threat of both attacks already landing on this turn. But like we mentioned, the passive play last turn, taking a double switch on the guaranteed Fluttermane sleep turn means he's open to an Awake now.
Oh, the Fake Out onto Landorus as it wakes up. So Landorus wakes up but isn't able to move. It flinches, but Fluttermane also wakes up, fires off a Dazzling Gleam, deals a little bit of damage to the Amoonguss and significant chip to the Iron Hands. But just like we mentioned, Amoonguss is like, welcome back, go back to bed now.
Yeah, I believe the Landorus had slept 3 turns. So that was a guaranteed wake and re-sleep, that no chance to attack in between. I think the move selection there from Fluttermane is important. We see the Dazzling Gleam isn't maybe enough damage to pick up the 2-hit KO on Iron Hands, which would leave it open to a Heavy Slam, while Amoonguss can just use a Spore to keep Heatran from coming in on either that slot or the slot next to it. But of course, if Alberto had opted for a Moonblast, then the Rage Powder play would have been available to protect the Iron Hands. The choice specs there kind of forcing Alberto in a either way, you're not going to safely just KO this Iron Hands over 2 turns because of how bulky it is. Of course, still really impactful damage if a Dazzling Gleam comes in this turn.
That being said, Alberto still has the Terrastalization available for that damage boost to the Dazzling Gleam.
He saved it so well throughout the game. So many possible opportunities to use it defensively. Saves it, and now has it prepped to use offensively.
He had just enough of a damage boost to try and pick up this KO on the Iron Hands. We saw how much damage a single non-Terra boosted Dazzling Gleam did to it. A Terra boosted Dazzling Gleam is going to connect with the Iron Hands and be more than enough damage to pick up that KO. So Iron Hands will go down after Alberto finally is forced to use his Terra. But Amoonguss covering again. Like you mentioned, you have the Heavy Slam option on the Flutter Mane and the Spore to cover if that Iron Hands goes down or if that Heatran came in.
Yeah, these sleeps have been obviously so impactful in this game. And Wolf has managed to reset them, use them to get the first KO onto King Gambit because of all the pressure that was down, but kind of spent them doing that. They both, Pokemon had a chance to then wake up, and the King Gambit, one of the sleeping Pokemon, was just knocked out. But then Amoonguss comes in, not too threatened. Alberto has to focus on KOing the Iron Hand so that he doesn't just lose more Pokemon, and so Amoonguss puts a couple things right back to sleep again. Of course, Landorus has spent a turn sleeping. It could wake and be faster than this Landorus. I don't believe it's selected a move yet.
It has not.
Because it flinched through the one turn, and so could still go after Wolf's Landorus, but stays asleep for now.
Stays asleep for this one turn, which allows Wolf's Landorus to fire off an attack here. The Flutter Mane also asleep from the Spore last turn, using its mandatory turn of sleep. And there's the big Terra Blast connecting with the Flutter Mane.
Every single one of those Terra Blasts so far, it had a Steel type switch into it. Was the possibility that turn, but finally one connects with a target it likes and gets the KO on Flutter Mane.
Yeah, and Amoonguss, because of that sleep turn from Alberto's Landorus, is able to get a Pollen Puff off onto Landorus. Didn't go for the Rage Powder because Alberto is also still threatening the Rock Slide. So Rage Powder not going to be doing anything against the Rock Slide when you have this Terra Flying Landorus on the board.
And Rock Slide's really scary here. You know, Wolf has Chi-Yu in the back. It's also going to be weak to Rock Slide. The Amoonguss is low enough health that it's threatened by it. And of course, flinches. You always have to worry about flinches. When it's Landorus walks into Rock Slide, that is a terrifying thing to see on the other side, even if you're not worried about the damage.
Well, there it is. It wakes up, fires off the Rock Slide, hits the Protect of the Amoonguss, and is going to be able to land the hit onto Landorus. Doesn't get enough for the KO, doesn't get the flinch, so Wolf is able to fire right back with that Terra Blast onto Alberto's Landorus. Doesn't pick up the KO though. One hit point left, and Heatran follows up with the Flamethrower into the Amoonguss. So Alberto not running the Heat Wave that everyone is used to seeing out of Heatran, which means it only has single target damage, which means we have one more turn for this Rock Slide to pick up these KOs.
Yeah, this is going to be such a close end game. All the Pokemon on Wolf's side are under a lot of threat here. He's got to find room for a couple of hits, but may not have the speed advantage.
Actually, just Landorus going for the Protect here. Going to defend against this Rock Slide, has to be locked into because of the Choice Scarf. Hits into the Protect and will connect with the Amoonguss. Not enough to pick up the KO though because of those Intimidates, but Heatran covering for a potential Chi-Yu switch in, gets the Earth Power and finishes off the Amoonguss here.
Yeah, I like the play from Wolf there. I think he wants both attackers on the field to try to put as much pressure on Alberto as possible. By protecting and clicking Pollen Puff into the Landorus on the other side, if Alberto had done anything other than KO the Amoonguss on that turn, then you KO the Landorus and you're in a really strong position. But does KO it, now has the 2v2. Not sure it's that advantageous of a 2v2 for Wolf. He's going to be moving after this Rock Slide. It's going to be close on whether it can KO with super effective damage against this flying type Landorus. And then the Heatran is just something that has to be dealt with. It showed the Earth Power last turn.
Oh, the Rock Slide finally misses. It misses the Landorus. Landorus survives the Rock Slide by dodging. Chi-Yu survives by bulk. Fires off a Snarl, drops the special attack of Heatran. And because of those fancy feet from the Landorus Therian form, is able to fire back with this Stomping Tantrum right into that Heatran, pick up that KO. And this took a while, but Wolf took game one.
Yeah, took it in kind of close fashion. It is terrifying to be up against that Choice Scarf Landorus, but this time the luck went a little bit in Wolf's way. We got a Rock Slide miss before we got a Rock Slide flinch.
That just means game two is going to be flinches.
That's probably true. Just an excellently played game by Wolf to use the pressure from Amoonguss to play this balanced, mostly defensive game, but then use sleeping Pokemon to bring Chi-Yu on the field, take a huge KO, and get Chi-Yu back off the field. That opened things up. It meant that there wasn't a great Terra Blast switch in later because you didn't want to risk Heatran and just not as bulky of a Pokemon as Kingambit, not as expendable maybe of a Pokemon as Kingambit, because then the defense against Chi-Yu becomes so poor.
Yeah, and here's the big overheat that finally poked a hole in Alberto's team. He had been switching back and forth all these sleeping Pokemon, but the overheat picks up the Kingambit and then is able to just keep cycling these spores. Again, that was the guaranteed wake-up turn from the Landorus, but Flutter Mane not guaranteed to wake up, but is able to fire off a big dazzling gleam that deals just enough damage to put that Iron Hands into 2-hit KO territory when the terrestrialization has been burned. And that was actually really big because now in the end game, there were no mind games over whether or not this Heatran was going to go grass or not.
Yeah, the Terra really did have to be used there. If Iron Hands had managed to land a Heavy Slam into Flutter Mane, there was no game really to be played afterwards. But I think Alberto saved it for the right moment, got an important KO with it, and brought us to a close end game.
Yeah, and these rock slides just doing a little bit of damage to Amoonguss. And this Chi-Yu that Wolf brought in the back, the Intimidate's helping a little bit, but that Chi-Yu able to shrug off that rock slide. Looked like it was about a 3-hit KO at the end game there, which meant that Chi-Yu is feeling a little bit safe once you can get some Intimidates off onto it.
Yeah, maybe a 3-hit KO, but probably 1 rock slide, 1 earth power as a KO, or at least close to that. 2 rock slides and 2 earth powers for sure. And so if that Landorus had gone down and not been able to Stomping Tantrum to Heatran that turn, Wolf would have been in trouble.
Well, Alberto liked what he saw from Wolf's Amoonguss last game and has decided to lead his own Amoonguss alongside the Landorus. But Wolf has opted to bring in his Chi-Yu in the lead, which is the natural predator of Amoonguss on the field. And Landorus actually getting off an Intimidate onto Alberto's Choice Scarf Landorus while not taking the Intimidate drop because of that clear Amulet here.
Yeah, a great differential in the Intimidates there because clear Amulet. This Amoonguss is under so much pressure, but of course, so is the Chi-Yu. The Terra choice here for Wolf. You know, you can Terra the Chi-Yu to try to get away from Stomping Tantrum damage. You can Terra the Landorus to try to go after the Amoonguss, or you can do nothing, as we see Wolf do, to try to save that tool for later in the game.
Well, Landorus is going to go ahead and U-turn the Chi-Yu, trying to switch that Landorus out and bring in one of his Pokemon in the back to tank attacks from this Chi-Yu and or this Landorus, while Amoonguss is just going to be sitting there protected.
Yeah, Amoonguss safe for now as Alberto chooses what to bring in. Of course, Heatran would love to come into a fire move.
It's so scary to switch into both of these Pokemon at once, though.
It is terrifying. These are Pokemon that are both big hitters and actually have really great synergy together. Very few Pokemon want to deal with both the ground, flying, and fire moves.
Well, that's the Heatran switching in, which loves to eat up this Heat Wave coming out from the Chi-Yu. The Flash Fire activates, boosts the power of Heatran's Fire-type moves moving forward, but Wolf covered for that switch-in with a Stomping Tantrum into the Landorus Therian that is now a Heatran 1-hit KO. Not even close.
Yeah, it makes so much sense to cover with a Stomping Tantrum, but a Stomping Tantrum, not an Earthquake. You have to pick which spot to Stomping Tantrum in. So the first step is, okay, I think Heatran might come in. I'm going to click Stomping Tantrum somewhere, but then aims it into the Landorus, not into the Amoonguss, which can just protect itself, and finds the Heatran switching in, immediately puts Alberto at a huge deficit in this game.
Yeah, that is an extremely big piece of the puzzle off the field for Alberto. And this last Pokemon being the Flutter Mane once again means there's no Kingambit in the back for Alberto, which means that this Landorus could freely switch in and out as it pleases, but it may just want to go on the offensive here against this Amoonguss and the Flutter Mane. Yeah,
it's pretty well positioned, right? The Landorus, it's not the fastest Pokemon in the field, but Flutter Mane is the only thing that'll move before it and cannot likely KO this Landorus in one hit, which gives room for the Landorus to go for a big hit. And if that is that Terra-flying Terra Blast, neither the Amoonguss or the Flutter Mane want to see that coming in. And even the Landorus can't just switch in and intimidate that because of the clear amulet. Meanwhile, Chi-Yu probably going to do its usual routine, has been on the field to threaten and get one KO, and then can just run away and come back when it's needed again.
Yeah, it is swimming upstream back into Wolf's pouch. And Amoonguss, the switch in here, a great choice to switch into an enemy Amoonguss and a Flutter Mane. Of course, that is the choice specs Flutter Mane, so whatever Alberto locks into, he will be stuck with that for the rest of the game or until that Flutter Mane switches out. Wolf goes for that terrestrialization. Again, this is so common that we see with this Landorus, just going for the immediate terrestrialization, and the Moonblast coming out from Alberto hits the Amoonguss on the switch-in, which means that Landorus is just free to fire off a Terra Blast here.
Yeah, and takes another huge KO. The dominoes are falling for Alberto. It's the situation where once you're behind, you have to take a risk. You've got to take a stab and just say, maybe the Landorus will protect, maybe it'll be the Landorus that switches. At least I can put the Landorus to sleep with Spore, but gives up another gigantic KO in the meantime. Now all of the offense has to come from a Scarf Landorus that has to pick a move on the next turn, and it will use that move for the rest of this game. Will not have the opportunity to switch again. You know, it can maybe heal with Pollen Puffs, it can get some Spore support, but whichever move it uses, and it may have to be the Rock Slide, is the only thing it'll have going for it. But of course, if it's Rock Slide, something like the Iron Hands or the Urshifu in the back for Wolf will never mind that Rock Slide. Yeah,
we'll be extremely happy to do so. And of course, you also have the Amoonguss on the field, where if you just let that Amoonguss stick around, it can just Spore your Landorus, and then you know, Wolf has the Intimidate support in the back, so just keep swapping in between and making sure that Alberto's Landorus isn't able to do any damage whatsoever. Which is what we see here as Wolf is switching out to get the to preserve the Intimidate, while Alberto goes for the Terrestrialization. That flying type Terra Blast was so strong for Wolf. Alberto wants a piece of it as well, but that's just going to go into the Protect of the Amoonguss.
Yeah, any other move selection just doesn't have the damage against every target you need. Of course, you can never lock into Stomping Tantrum because you've got to deal with a Landorus at some point. You can't lock into Rock Slide because you're going to have to deal with an Iron Hands at some point. So Terra Blast is really the only option there, but it can just be intimidated down. And now the Flying type Landorus is more vulnerable to this Iron Hands if it ever wakes up. Alberto's only avenue back into this is exactly how he lost Game 1. It's how many Pokemon are currently sleeping and they're going to need some time to wake up. That's time bought for Landorus to fire off as many of these terrifying Terra Blasts as possible.
Yeah, but also as many chances for Wolf to get Intimidates off onto Alberto's Landorus, because even if Wolf's Landorus is asleep, it can still use its Intimidate ability on switch-in to drop the attack, and you can already see that paying dividends. With the terrestrialization of the Landorus as well, Alberto's Amoonguss is now trapped as a grass type with that Chi-Yu in the back as well.
Yeah, Chi-Yu and Terraflying Terra Blast available. It's not looking like the bulkiest Pokemon. Amoonguss trying to do its part. Says, okay, it's going to take a lot of Terra Blast to deal with this Iron Hands. Maybe we can chip in a few Pollen Puffs. But that's, of course, because it can't Spore these two Pokemon. They're both asleep already. Wolf kind of content to play a pretty slow game where you get enough Intimidates down to win, maybe.
All right, well, Wolf is bringing back in his own Amoonguss, which has been protecting itself and healing up with that Regenerator. Another Terra Blast connects with Wolf's Landorus, almost picks up the KO there, but with 9 hit points, Landorus is still up on the field. Takes another turn of sleep, but here comes the Pollen Puff. Does enough damage that 9 hit points. Amoonguss on Alberto's side takes the Intimidate off the board for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I actually think that's pretty important. Wolf may be expecting he could take one Terra Blast there, maybe safely maneuver in a way that nothing could ever be Spored, because he could switch the Iron Hands back in for the Landorus and reset Intimidate. Maybe just one thought going through the head, but because that Pollen Puff also lands alongside the Terra Blast, it picks up the KO. And now this Landorus is stuck using Terra Blast for the rest of the game. It is a -1 Terra Blast, but at least we'll have that the rest of the game. The problem is the Chi-Yu. It's on the field. It is fairly, more bulky than some of the Chi-Yu that we've seen, and is a huge threat to both of these Pokemon. If it can live one Terra Blast and just overheat, this Landorus that is Choice Scarf Lock cannot protect itself to try to buy time for a Spore. That would be game deciding.
Yeah, it needs to protect, it needs to take this overheat from the Chi-Yu if it's going to be possible, but the Chi-Yu doesn't even need to survive a Terra Blast. Amoonguss can do that for it. Here comes the Terra Blast. It is at -1 thanks to the Intimidate, connects with the Amoonguss thanks to the Rage Powder, is not able to pick up the KO, and Amoonguss is able now to eat its Citrus Berry and recover off. Now, Chi-Yu needs to land this overheat, and it does. The overheat connects onto Landorus. Big damage, no special attack drops. Choice Specs boosted, Beads of Ruin, Chi-Yu. 1-hit KO on that Landorus.
Yeah, Wolf doing an excellent job to position this Chi-Yu back on the field next to an Amoonguss that had enough health to, really didn't need any health, but enough health that even if that first overheat had missed, there was going to be another opportunity on the next turn.
Just there's the forfeit.
Really well played by Wolf. Yeah, the forfeit comes in and pushes Wolf into the finals of the Pittsburgh Regional Championship because Amoonguss had no damage left to add. Just so well played by Wolf.